Let's go straight to our top story. The national government's borrowings ballooned to 2.56 trillion pesos in the January to September period from 917 billion pesos a year ago. This is on the back of ramped up debt issuances and loan availments to fund the country's COVID-19 response measures. In September alone, borrowings jumped to over 90 billion pesos from 15 billion pesos a year ago, data from the Bureau of Treasury showed. Year-to-date, gross borrowings made up 85% of the government's plan to raise 3 trillion pesos of the entire year. All right, happy Monday, Dan, and happy biggest IPO in 4 years. Is Converge surprising in its debut? Is a hype real?
All right. Well, for now, not so much. But again, this is 2 minutes into the listing. Take a look at my terminal here. It's just moving like crazy. You can see on the upper hand here the volumes, right? So 66 million already in terms of worth of trades. And that is trading at 16 pesos and 70 centavos more or less right now. That's down by 0.6% from the IPO price, which was 16 pesos and 80 centavos. And that was already priced near the low end of the range that they were hoping for. And the pre-open price, so ahead of 9:30, was actually at 17 pesos and 64. So quite a disappointing open, I have to say, although this also was something that a lot of analysts have expected. Now, if you take a peek at Converge itself, of course, they have already received this money, right? So they've already raised 25.3 billion pesos. Like you said, biggest in 4 years. So 68% of the offering came from the existing shares of Converge ICT founders, which is, of course, Dennis Anthony Uy and Warburg Pincus. Now, they've also announced that they were planning to invest up to $2.5 billion by 2025. Now, right now, they're just in Luzon. And of course, the target is to have all three of the islands of the country, so that's Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, connected under the Converge network. Their target is actually to cover 55% of households nationwide by 2025. Now, as I mentioned, Philstocks, for example, had expected this drop already. So what they said was that at 16 pesos and 80 per share, so at the IPO price, their projected price to earnings ratio for this year was already quite hefty, 48.64 times earnings, and they see it as overvalued relative to their peers. So again, bias to the downside. This is also something that Diversified Securities could also said correction is a possibility because of its lofty valuation. But he did say, this is from Darren Pangan of Diversified Securities, that because of the fact that the local bourse has actually been rallying, it comes at an opportune time when the local market has been on an uptrend, especially supported by net foreign buying. So we'll be checking back in on Converge throughout the broadcast. For now, trading below its IPO price, Jess.
Well, Dan, speaking of improving investor sentiment, what a week for the local index last week. Is it going still full steam ahead now despite this typhoon?
Now, despite the typhoon, as you mentioned, and a lot of connectivity issues that we've been experiencing, even, brownouts here, you can see the local index still continuing that uptrend. That's up by 0.02%, a little bit flattish there, but nevertheless, opening in the green at 6485.34. Recall that we're excited to see this actually breaching 6,500, as analysts have been mentioned. And as you said, Friday saw our advance for a fifth straight day. So an entire week of gains. We bucked a broader decline in the rest of the Asian region. We were the highest in 4.5 months. We were up by 2.2% on Friday, and for the week we were up by close to 10%, with 63% of the index players closing above their 200-day moving averages. So that is a pretty big deal. Another really exciting thing is foreign investors continuing to buy into our local bourse. After 28 straight days of selling, we actually saw 3 straight days of net foreign buying, and this is something that analysts have been saying is the reason why we did see that surge. Recall that we were the best performer among more than 90 global equity indices tracked by Bloomberg on Friday. Now, what has been causing this turnaround? Now, a lot of things going on last week. Recall that you've got the 2021 budget now passed. from the Congress, waiting now for President Duterte's signature. But you've also got the latest moves to reopen the local economy. So you've got, for example, the government now allowing foreign nationals to re-enter the country starting November 1. And they also, increase the religious gatherings from 30% to 10% in some area, to 30% rather, from 10% in some areas. Public transportation, so you've got motorcycle taxis now, and importantly also 100% capacity for hotels in some areas. So that proves well for our tourism industry. And on that note, I do just want to take a quick peek at the property sector, because a lot of eyes are on the tourism space now and how that's going to be affecting our property players. You've got, of course, in separate messages to Business World, Invest Hospitality, for instance, and Double Dragon saying they are, of course, welcoming the easing that will now allow hotels to operate at 100%. And PNB Securities' Manny Lisbona is saying that this might be a further sign that we may have rounded the corner. Recall that our infections have been staying at around 1,000 levels for a few days at least. And you can see our property space actually bucking that uptrend that is down by 0.8% this morning. And another one, though, that is saying that maybe we should not rest on our laurels here or be overly optimistic is RCBC's Robert Ramos. He is saying that valuation is still a bit high. So there's actually a feeling that people are still on guard with their money. And I'm just going to pull out for you very quickly here our PE, forward PE ratios, because this is something he is saying, Robert Ramos is saying, is quite high. And you can see that V-shaped, jump here. We're already approaching 19 times forward PEs according to Bloomberg. And that is the highest we've seen since at least March 2018. And our 5-year average is just at 16.7. So we're quite high already. He said that it might be tough for us to keep going beyond 6,400 unless, of course, a vaccine is produced. But RCBC's Mike Ricafort is still even more optimistic. He's saying that there might be a target of 6,700. This would be the next important breakout point further to further, of course, the upside potential. So a lot of exciting things going on. We've also got a lot of earnings from our biggest bank, BDO, and also Union Bank. So we're going to take that up later on in the broadcast with Chinabank Securities' Rastine Mercado. Now, meanwhile, Jess, one other sector to be watching out for here is mining. We've been looking at the counter mining and oil for the past few days now. Tell us, what is the DOF planning to do with the privatization of the mining assets?
Okay, so last week, or at least the past few weeks, we've been talking about how there has been developments, at least in exploration in the West Philippine Sea. This time around, you have the finance department really wanting to work on idle assets. Because it turns out you have a lot of mining assets that have been left idle since the 1980s. And this time, the finance department has formed an interagency task force to actually address legal issues that hinder the privatization of several mining assets. According to Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez, he wants a clear path for these assets to be privatized and for their operations to actually be revived. So we have a number of groups and agencies actually forming this task force. For one, of course, you have members from the finance department. There will be also, of course, officials from the environment department, as well as the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, the Privatization and Management Office, as well as from the Office of the Solicitor General. But according to Mines and Geosciences Bureau Director Wilfredo Moncano, this is going to be more than just illegal issues here. Of course, according to him, and those assets that have been left idle, two of those have actually legal issues, but some have also social and environmental concerns. And according to him, it's ideal to resolve all these challenges before proceeding with privatization. And the government is really keen on mitigating or eliminating these concerns first. Or another option, according to Moncano, is that there might actually be some investors who would be willing to risk knowing all these potential issues in these mining assets. Just to give you a clear idea here, what are these properties or assets here that have been left idle here? You have the likes of Maricalo Mining in Negros Occidental, as well as Nonok Mining in Surigao del Norte and the North Davao Mining in Davao del Norte. According to the PMO, these mines have failed to settle their debts with government financial institutions. That led to the transfer of their assets and their shares to the national government here. But there are some miners as well which actually have legal issues, the like of MMIC, Bagakay Mining in Marinduque. They do mine nickel. There were environmental complaints lodged against the company, and they were actually forced in 1984 by the Development Bank of the Philippines. There's also BUSINESSWORLD Mining in Negros Oriental. They actually mine copper. They can produce up to 105 million tons of copper ore rather, and they could generate as much as 1 billion pesos in revenues. However, operations were suspended in 1983 due to lack of funds. Now, Dominguez is saying the privatization of assets will revive the mining industry as well as raise revenues rather, and provide more jobs, especially in the rural areas. Some shares, in fact, according to him, were auctioned in the past, but the highest bidder did not fulfill the obligations, and that led to decades of litigation and left the assets idle. Now, according to Ronald Garcidero, is director of the Chamber of Mines of the Philippines, time is of the essence here, and that developing old and unused mines could actually boost economic recovery. And according to him, if the task force wants to save time, then they can negotiate with parties and arrive at a good faith settlement beneficial to all stakeholders, and that the government may want to look at other mineral assets similarly legally burdened and package these into projects rather that may be opened for bidding.
Okay, just a lot of exciting things going on in the mining space, and even those nickel prices actually surging during this pandemic. But a lot of eyes are on Fedex Mining. You've actually got them down by 1.5% now. What's happening there? Why are they suspending operations?
They are halting their for 2 days, at least, because there are several workers who actually tested positive for COVID-19. Now, that's very alarming, of course, and they're not taking any chances. They're going to conduct mass testing of 1,000 employees who had potential exposure to these cases. Just to give you an idea, they had a first batch of employees who were tested for COVID-19, around 64 employees, and there were 6 actually who turned out to be positive for SARS-CoV-2. So this is something, of course, that we are going to keep an eye on, but definitely have Fedex not taking any chances, suspending operations for the next 2 days.
Definitely, and not just, of course, Fedex, but the rest of the economy that's starting to reopen right now. So a lot of eyes are on that, whether we can actually maintain these safety standards.
Now, here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. A lawmaker is calling on power regulators to allow installment and policy until January next year. That's instead of allowing their dues. Bicol Party List Congressman Alfredo sought the Energy Regulator and the National Electrification Administration to extend their no disconnection policy amid hard times in the pandemic. Garbin made the same appeal to the IATF to assist small businesses on the matter. At the same time, he said the Philippines needs more sustainable sources of power generation in the provinces such as solar, wind, and hydro. Albay Representative Joey Salceda said the new House leadership is working on measures that will lower energy costs. Over at the Senate, Energy Committee Chairman Sherwin Gatchalian flagged 2.5 billion pesos worth of unliquidated funding provided to rural utilities. He said the National Electrification Administration violated its own policy to stop subsidies to electric cooperatives despite unaccounted balance from the period of 2016 to 2019. The power agency has yet to update the number of unaccounted subsidies issued to rural utilities. According to them, some 15 billion pesos is needed to achieve full electrification by 2022. The Makati City government passed an ordinance authorizing the acquisition of right-of-way for its subway project with InfraDev Holdings. This covers the underground portion of 9 roads, which includes Hilpuyat Avenue, South Avenue, JP Rizal Avenue, JP Rizal Extension, and Vito Cruz Extension. The project also affects Kalayaan Avenue, EDSA, C5 Road, and San Guillermo Avenue. According to the ordinance, the 9 roads are in the road and bridge inventory of the DWH and fall under the jurisdiction of the department. Makati LGU said it has made a valid and definite offer to the agency for negotiations on the right-of-way acquisition. The $3.5 billion Makati subway project is originally targeted to be completed by 2025 and will have 10 stations traversing Makati's central business district.
Insurers are now evaluating products like pay-per-use auto coverage and small payment schemes to help their clients cope with the economic effects of the pandemic. Philippine Insurers and Reinsurers Association, or PIRA, said pay-per-use auto insurance is a timely response to higher unemployment. These are smaller premiums with less risks covered for clients who can no longer afford the annual premiums. PIRA also sees mobile applications like chatbots to drive growth in pay-per-use auto insurance by offering them at a low cost or in small transactions. The insurers are also banking on chatbots upgrades that could allow the detection of stress or sadness in users, potentially helping insurers adjust their selling pitches. If last week is any indication of better things to come, this week should be one of the most exciting we've seen in the doldrums that has become 2020. Now, here to chat about those events, we have with us Chinabank Securities is Rastine Mercado. Good morning, Rastine.
Good morning, Danie. Thanks for having me.
Rastine, okay, Converge IPO. Did you expect this at all, especially since it was oversubscribed naman and the pre-IPO pre-opening price was actually above 17. So what's happening here? Is this a temporary sell off of profit taking? Is this set to rebound, or is this actually a fairer valuation?
Well, I guess as with anything or an IPO this size, markets are usually very cautious, especially since you're already at day six of a possible rally. So I guess people or traders are actually looking into locking profits at this point. So hopefully that does translate into some rotation, especially into new issues such as Converge. But then really it's possibly one reason why some players still hands off is that they're still looking for prices to settle. And hopefully, when it does, when volatility kind of dies down, then we'll probably see better movement or better buying or selling based on technical indicators.
Okay, so it's now actually falling towards 15 peso levels. What level do you think is a fair value for investors to start picking this up?
Well, I guess if with a decline as steep as this, probably when it does settle, for example, if it retests around 1560 based on your chart here, then that could be a possible entry point for traders, and hopefully that leads into rebound.
Okay, now let's talk about the long-term plans of Converge. They are, of course, targeting to have 55% of the entire country covered by 2025. Are these overly ambitious plans if you compare them, for example, to our incumbent telco players and the way that they have been cutting their capex?
Well, I guess the thing about Converge is that it's a firm that's purely focusing on the fiber internet space. So as we all know, when the pandemic started and with all of the requirements from work from home arrangements, distance learning, we did see some uptick in terms of demand for internet connectivity. So given that, and given that the space is pretty much at the forefront of technology of internet connectivity, then we do see Converge's plans kind of to be very reasonable because it's really trying to capitalize on a space that has growth. We also see the other telco players kind of moving into the space. So of course, our legacy telcos are a little bit preoccupied with rolling out 5G services, but then they've also been trying to ramp up their fiber connectivity services. So given that all of these players are looking into expanding their fiber internet services, then that might be confirmation that this is really a space that they're trying to capitalize on.
Okay, just one more point on that. I've got the terminal here of all the other telco players. Do you expect these to be moving this week because of the Converge IPO? Are they going to be, are investors going to be shifting their positions?
Well, I think technically these, if you've seen all of the other issues that have been strong over the past few months, even at the beginning of the pandemic, you have seen these issues kind of being sold off to significant support junctures. So given that the rest of the market will probably enter into a profit-taking phase we do expect some rotation from those funds that have taken profit into these laggards. That
Okay.
also includes the likes of Pure Gold, for example. So hopefully that is using enough for them to kind of rally over the short term. But then if you're comparing all of these three players, obviously your Globe and your PLDT have uh, been historically growing their bottom lines at single digits, right? Whereas Converge has been growing at double digits, around 50%, right? So that in itself already gives you an idea that this new player is actually growing at a much faster rate than the others.
Last one on that, because we're seeing actually Dito Telecom up by 2.5% on the day of the IPO, and this was something that was already moving during the Converge IPO. Details were being released, and some analysts had been saying that there is some speculation in the market that could be because they could have tie-ups in the future once Converge comes online. What is the possibility of that?
Well, I think at the point, since nothing has been disclosed, so it's hard to say. But I think what really is driving Vito's stock price rally is the more details that we learn about it, and as they move closer towards actually ramping up and providing services to the general public. So as long as investors see more information or more updates with regard to their business in relation to getting to that point, then I think that should be a market positive catalyst for traders and investors.
Okay, so still a long-term play for you here. Now let's move on to the earnings that have just been released. We've got our biggest bank here, BDO, posting third quarter net income, okay, at 12.3 billion pesos. I'll pull that out for you so you can see here. But just to note that this is basically on the back that they're actually saying that they're still believing in the strong business franchise and robust balance sheet, and that it's in a good position pa rin. You've got 9-month net income at 16.6 billion pesos. I had a quick peek here, Rastine, and I just wanted to share this with our viewers here because if you take a look at the quarterly estimates, at least for Bloomberg, you've actually got them at around 11 billion. So their actual number is 12.3 billion. Is this a beat for you as well?
Well, I think it is. But then again, if you really look at the broad picture when it comes to banks, it's really mapping out the loan loss provisions, right? So again, that has been a concern since early on in the year, the extent of possible loan defaults. So I think that's the biggest concern. So it's good that a lot of our banks have actually been proactive in kind of managing that, and they have actually provisioned a lot already. So, but then again, as you move into the next few quarters, that might continue to change, given that, of course, we have continuing softness in consumer confidence, continuing softness in business confidence. So I guess it's really still something that we should continue to monitor, and especially since all this pandemic or the dragon growth can actually will hamper growth well into 2021, depending on how things progress over the next few months or the next few quarters.
Okay, so BDO is actually trading down after that. So that's down by 1% to 96 pesos. Can you compare that with BPI and what actually happened there? Because in terms of BPI, their 9-month profit fell 22%. But if that actually, if you took away the provisions, it actually had gone up, and especially loan growth as well. I mean, not double digits, but still, low single digits. Does that show something promising to you, especially given that, monetary easing might have already gotten into play, and maybe in the long term you're going to be seeing some loan growth picking up?
I think ultimately, if top line continues to grow and you're trying to control your costs, that should technically be a net positive for banks. But then again, given that the earnings are being impacted by these loan loss provisions, so obviously, moving into the next few quarters or into next year, we can see some improvement in terms of earnings when these loan loss provisions start easing up.
Okay, so BPI also in the red, down 0.6%. And finally, Union Bank is another one that I do also need to break here. Third quarter net income, 4.2 billion pesos, which is actually up 11% from a year ago. Net interest income up 27% due to what they call significant margin improvement. Are they doing better than the bigger banks?
Well, it all boils down to how much improvement is in NIMs or in net interest margin. So
Okay.
a huge jump in NIMs or a huge improvement could lead to a higher net interest income. So obviously, if that's sustainable, then that's something that we should be looking at. But if it's not sustainable, then that's a little problematic. So obviously, if it's an improvement or sustained improvement in NIMs, then we should continue seeing better numbers, at least for some of these banks.
Okay, so if I just take a step back and look at all of the financials as a whole, of course you're China Bank, so you can't really comment in detail about your own bank, but just as a whole, would you say that there is a general optimistic sentiment now given these third quarter earnings?
I think there is some mounting optimism with regard to the sector. Over the past few months, we've seen the sector really being beat down, with stock prices really near their pattern lows or actually multi-year lows. So I guess it's really just that a lot of people were looking at third quarter earnings because we knew that the second quarter earnings were pretty bad or disappointing. So the general consensus was there would be some improvement in the third quarter, right? So I guess it's just a matter of if these expectations are quantifiable in terms of improvement. So hopefully we do see that momentum kind of kicking back in the sector. So hopefully this does translate into higher stock prices and better earnings moving down the line.
Okay, and URC, Rastine, comment on that. That seemed to have jumped and had a rally of 6 days on the back of higher earnings, longest streak in 10 weeks. What was so exciting about this stock? Was this not already priced in after the
I think,
earnings?
well, with URC in terms of top line growth, it was pretty muted, around low single digits. Then the cost improvements are actually very encouraging, which is what buoyed the strength and growth of the bottom line. So hopefully we do see that being sustained. And obviously,
Okay.
the improvement in its the segments in terms of market share, we've seen that. So hopefully that keeps on growing. So that's one of the exciting things. And also stronger business from its international markets, right? So hopefully the pandemic, as it eases and as lockdowns kind of are rolled back, hopefully that does translate into better earnings for URC moving forward.
Okay, and finally, Rastine, before Jess and I let you go, I just wanted to ask on your insights on how the trading will be this week for the index. We saw an incredible rally last week, up 10%, 5 straight days of gains. Is that in any way sustainable this week?
Well, honestly, 5 full days of 10% gains, one would come to think that when is it going to stop? So I think that the market's probably going to move sideways or pull back this week, considering that a lot of our traders will be taking profits. Hopefully that does translate into some rotation. So if we do see that movement into second, third liners, then that might be some reassurance that the rally could be sustained over the medium to long term.
Okay, so let's see whether that movement starts actually happening, and if that becomes a broader based rally, then the bigger names that might actually be sustaining. You're going to be seeing my terminal here, Pure Gold, jumping by 2 4/10% as the index continues to a 6th straight day in the green, hopefully sustaining that until the end of the trading day. Thank you so much. That was, of course, Rastine Mercado from Chinabank Securities.
Thank you for having me, Danie.
And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Monday, October 26th. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Jess Delos. Santos. Catch us again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. We are 1 years.